Welcome. We are here. Good morning. Good Sunday morning. I am your whatever I am, author, Leto Armitage. I'm brain dead. But I have tea. I'll prove it. And I have paints and minis and stuff to chat about. So I'm a little disoriented this morning. I'm kind of in a fog. But the show must go on. Sorry, I needed some tea there. So one thing I'm going to try to look at this week is some more work on this guy. Now, I wanted to show you a finished model in that line I did a little while back. This is a real basic paint job. It's nothing fancy, but I think it looks nice. I discovered years ago that I actually can be a really, really good painter, but it takes an amount of time that I really don't want to commit. I like to get models done in a reasonable amount of time and then move on to the next one. So the first thing I'm going to do today is actually a little bit of repair. This poor guy, one of my Warmer Hordes or Hordes maulers, is a bit damaged. And we've also had some paint flake off there. Oh, I didn't notice that till just now. Oh, and up here. This guy's going to need a little bit of TLC to get him back into shape. But let's start with just reattaching his arm. Poor guy lost his arm. Fortunately, trolls can regrow arms. So, it's not a completely debilitating event. Notice one of my audios is down. We're going to pull that up just to make sure it's at full volume. This is the Gorilla Glue I opened last time. Haven't used it since, so it's still very fresh. I really like the Gorilla Gel Glue because it doesn't run. But if you're looking to get into modeling and you don't happen to have access to Gorilla Glue, or it's a little more than you want to spend, just standard super glue works just fine. I'm going to scrape some extra off here. Do not limit yourself because you don't have what you think are the perfect materials. Do not let perfect be the enemy of good, or the enemy of progress at least. And we'll just hold this for a minute. So what have I been working on this week? Well, mainly I've been working on A Man with a Maiden, getting the 3rd chapter done, and continuing to work on Rat Catchers, which will have a new chapter out tomorrow, Monday. I made some design changes that I detailed last week during our craft and chat then, and nope, it's still not holding. Okay, let me hold that a bit longer. And I've also this week spent some time detailing some of the mechanics, some of the RPG Pathfinder 2 mechanics for the characters, including their new versions of their character sheets, custom wizarding school for Smythe, custom apparitions for Youngji, and the next chapter, which I do not have really titled yet, is going to be a Youngji-centric chapter, which I look forward to. And you'll see some evidence of both of their progress in their interaction with the guild. This is not setting yet. What is going on? And I'm getting super glue on my hands, which is kind of an inevitable consequence of doing this kind of stuff. If anyone is curious about the world of Rael, which the Rat Catchers is set in, I do have another story out, also set in the same world, although it is under my own name, not the Liam Armitage nom de plume, because it is an erotica piece. It is a Yuri, girls love, lesbian, whatever you want to call it, sapphic piece set aboard a privateer ship. A story that I came up with for a challenge to do pirates-themed stories. Trying to show you something more interesting than me just holding this still. This is not probably the best TV, so to speak, huh? But let me try to get this set, and then we're going to move back to painting the dice tower. In the meantime, let's chat a little bit. There's been plenty of stuff this week to talk about, but it's hard to avoid wanting to talk about AI. There have been several landmark cases in the United States on AI this last week, and they're very, very, very important. Plus, a lawsuit filed within the last 2 weeks that's going to be very, very important. And all these cases touch on different AI issues in critical ways. And I don't have any information up about these cases right now, so I'm going to speak broadly about them. But I've seen a lot of misinformation spread throughout the internet, and I think it's worth a little bit of clarification and discussion. And first up, I probably should say where my position on AI is. I am not anti-AI, but I'll be honest, I'm not anti many things. I'm anti-fascist, I'm anti-racism. I mean, there are a few things that on principle I'm anti to, but most things, honestly, I think they need to be viewed with some balance and with context. And I think AI is one of those. And by the way, I hate the term AI. I despise it. I can't stand the term because what these things are is not AI. That's a marketing term that people have been snookered with in order to convince them that the technology is magical, which it's not. What they are is language learning models. And understanding how those work and the restrictions of them, I think, is important to understanding what they can really do. And I think ultimately they're tools. I am not anti-AI. This has been contentious. By the way, I'm going to do the bands of these barrels. I'm going to use a cold steel. I normally do more like a bronze, but I've got a lot of brown tones in here right now, and I want a few things that really kind of jump out a little more. Okay, so I know AI is very contentious in the writing circles, and I think people have a right to be concerned about it. But I have a real concern about anti-AI people because a lot of times they don't seem to be very pro-writer. And I am pro-writer. I am pro-creativity. I am pro-people making things. Now, notice I didn't say I'm pro-AI. To me, AI, LLMs are tools and have to be viewed as such. And I think as many technologies that come out rapidly without a lot of preparation, we as a society have been caught unprepared for them. And the time we should have talked about things like copyright ramifications of LLMs was years ago when this technology was on the horizon. But of course we didn't. So now there needs to be a conversation. And in my mind, there's just one simple truth we must accept. You can't put a genie back in the bottle. If it was Barbara Eden, why would you want to? I mean, she looked great in that outfit. But aside from my, fantasies of my youth, let's be serious. When technology really becomes engaging and gets out there, you're not going to roll it back. People will use it. They'll find a way to use it. It's inevitable. So you should find a way to make it work within the parameters you want. And I think if you're a pro-writer, there are some pretty significant parameters you want, such as respecting authors' copyright and making sure they're reimbursed for the works they do. Now, I have long held that one of the biggest problems with copyright is the inability for one of the problems with AI is the inability of authors to eventually opt out of it. But this, and a lot of people say that this must happen. The problem is that it's not going to happen. Because, at least in the United States, we have a concept of copyright called fair use. And fair use means that there are exceptions to copyright. There are times and places and situations in which authors do not maintain control of their work. And this is important because while copyright is necessary to encourage the creation of work, fair use is absolutely critical as well. And one of the cases this week very much, well, really both of them, leaned heavily on what is fair use and a modern interpretation of that. By the way, if you're looking for a really structured discussion about that, that's not going to be here. I'm just chatting. Excuse me while I put a little more paint on this barrel band. So we need fair use. Now let's look at the cases and talk about it, because while I've wanted a way for authors to opt out, I've known that's unrealistic because of fair use. And one of my big questions has been, well, what is going to be the boundary of fair use here? Now, I'm talking about the U.S. law because that's where these cases came out, and it's the country where I know copyright the best. I have a vague understanding of British and Canadian copyright, but not as detailed as I do American. Although there is certainly some similarity, because all of these copyrights derive to some degree from the Statute of Queen Anne in the UK, specifically England. And I can't remember the year. But it's been modified a fair bit country to country, and what is fair use in one country definitely may not be in another country. Sorry, let me get this table out of the way. I don't know if you can see here very well, but I am trying to get the back of the barrels, which isn't quite so easy. But you don't want big glaring mistakes in the paint. Now, even though I've been working on this for a while, I've actually only done a small amount of it relatively, because I've just been doing it on stream. But that's enough blocking for the bands, I think. Now, one of the cases was really interesting because it involved Anthropic, the company that makes the Claude AI model, LLM model, language learning model, which is actually one of the ones I'm more familiar with. I've been fairly impressed by it. And the company ruled against Anthropic, saying that, I'll shake up the paint. We're going to go with this yellow and try to do a little dry brushing here to highlight the straw. The judge said that taking the author's works and creating derivative was allowed because one of the exceptions under copyright law is transformative. And they ruled that the AI engine was sufficiently transformative that it did not violate the copyright. And frankly, I think that's probably the correct ruling, because that was the issue at case that was being discussed. Sorry, I'm looking for a dry brush while I talk. I may just use this as a dry brush, beat it up a little bit. This is a stippling brush. I don't want to mess it up and turn it into a dry brush. I actually have some dry brushes around here, if I can find them. Oh, here's one, but it's seen better days. Yeah, that's kind of rough. Let's give it a shot. Let's see how it does. Actually, no, I'll take this one. This is a cheap brush, a number 4 flat, and I'll use it as a dry brush. So for this, I'm going to take some paint right here, get the brush a bit wet, and then, let's try to move this so you can see it, I'm going to wipe most of it off. I want there just a little bit of paint left on the brush. There we go. And then I'm going to just softly go over here and try to get some texture on the raised surfaces. So while the judge in the Anthropic case did rule that the created works were transformative enough to fall under fair use, he said the acquisition of the books was clearly illegal. Nothing about transformation changes how you acquire the original works, and that the ongoing storing of them was a violation. And I think those are good rulings. And I think that ruling is likely to stand. I don't think there's anything that can be done on appeal that will change any of that. Oh, I went a little too hard there. I'm just not sure this is going to work well, but we'll keep going and find out. The other case was more interesting. Now, the other case was against Meta, and it got ruled in Meta's favor, which I'd never like to see things go in Meta's favor. I'm not a fan of them as a corporate entity or any of their practices. But it was very interesting because the judge basically said, by the way, you, the plaintiffs, made the wrong argument. And I thought this was an interesting point from the judge. Now, one of the historic points of fair use is that the fair use cannot harm the market ability, the financial prospects of the copyright holder. And there's good reason for that, of course. You know what? As I'm working on this more and more, I think I'm just going to paint over it yellow, and then we will do some stuff to make it darker. We will use the raised surfaces to instead fill in the lower surfaces with a wash. But the dark is kind of nice against the yellow. It provides a nice background. I'm still glad I did that, though in retrospect I probably should have done like black. Oh well, it'll be fine. It is okay to change direction on things, both in painting and in writing. Give me just a second here. It occurred to me that I probably should have chat up to see. Ooh. Here, I'll even type into chat. Hello. Now, what the judge said that they should have made as an argument is that the LLM's products would violate the fair use principle of not competing. Now, I found this interesting because this is very rarely, I've never seen this argument combined with the transformative principle passing before. Normally, to violate someone's ability to market a product, you have to basically copy the work. But in this case, he argued, well, not argued, he stated in his ruling, which will provide a big door for filing another case, that how to put this, that the fact that LLMs can produce work so rapidly and in such volume that it provides a new situation where even a highly transformative set of works can hurt the original work holders financially by just flooding and overwhelming the market in a way that human-created transformative works couldn't in the past. And that is a very interesting argument, legally speaking. And I like that argument, actually. I do. And I'm going to go ahead and tell you, I am perfectly fine with AI-written books being banned everywhere and them basically being illegal. Now, again, let's go back to me saying I'm not anti-AI. I think some people come from an incredible place of privilege when they reject all AI use. And just because I don't want to see an AI-written book on Amazon or Smashwords or anywhere else doesn't mean that I don't think they have utility to writers. When I was a kid, there were whole books published that you could buy or check out from the library that were like 1,000 common plots, 1,000 character ideas, stuff like that. And using AI basically for that, I think is fine. I think using AI to bounce an idea off of is fine for rubber ducking. I tried it out once. I brought up Claude and I told it, I was at a point in the story that I was kind of stuck with, and I asked it for ideas. Now, it turned out that none of its ideas were ones that I actually wanted to use. I didn't like them at all. But that back and forth with it helped unlodge my brain a little bit. Let me dry off the brush here. Always important to wash your brushes. And it helped me think of an idea I did want to use. And programming, if you're not familiar with it, that's called rubber ducking. You kind of talk to yourself. This is rubber ducking with a language learning model. Because basically it knows all the tropes. And it allowed me to reject through the tropes, but think of something new. So I see that as a modern version of the old. Now, I'm happy with online bookstores rejecting AI content. I'm perfectly fine with that. Sorry, I'm thinking about the windows now. I'm going to go with a strong white for the windows. Long term, I don't know what I want to do for like the panes of glass or whatever, but a nice pale white will be a good background regardless of what I end up doing on these windows here. Specifically, I mean the windows in this tower. Let me move the camera back here. These. But to say that just using AI period is wrong, I don't agree with that. I don't. And I do think it comes from a place of incredible privilege. There are a lot of people using AI as an assistive tool, and I think that's brilliant. And not everybody has access to the same amount of time, resources, and I mean, let's be honest, a lot of writers already use LLMs, even if they don't know it. Things like Grammarly are LLMs. You do an automated spell check, you're using a very simple LLM. And using things in that vein, whether it's just to brainstorm ideas, maybe help generate a basic outline, you know, that even having it act as a kind of editor. Now, is that taking away people's jobs? Well, yeah. But frankly, not everybody can afford to hire an editor. And a human editor is still going to be better. And if some people can decide that an LLM is close enough to an editor to work for them, that they don't need to hire one, well, the cart and buggy makers had to find new jobs too after the invention of the automobile. I'm sorry, but it is not the role of copyright to preserve the market. It is the role of copyright to preserve the desire of people to create because they can be financially rewarded by controlling how their creations are distributed. And that is a critical part we have to remember about why copyright law exists. It exists, at least in the US, explicitly for the reason of encouraging creation. So we have to look at it in that terms. In those terms. And I think these rulings have actually been pretty smart rulings. I was really afraid for some really bad takes from the courts. The courts are not known for keeping up with technology very well. I remember years ago some cases involving the early days of the internet, and some of the rulings were truly painful. But it seems here they've really taken their time and looked at the principles and come up with consistent rulings. Now, I still have concerns here. I have a lot of concerns still. I don't really have concerns with the second ruling, or even the opening to a third ruling that the judge mentioned in his decision. If they come out and say, you cannot train an LLM on books that prints out books, I am totally cool with that. 100%. Because they've already ruled, and it would have to be ruled by a higher court at this point, if another court ruled that it's not transformative enough for fair use. So I think the solution is to say, you just can't use it to make a competing product. That still leaves all those assistive tools that I like. You can still ask it to give you an outline. An outline is no... Okay, anyone who's ever written a book, anyone who's written a novel-length work, I have, knows that there is a world of difference from an outline to a book. If you want it to help you brainstorm, that's still an assistive, not a transformative function. So that's essentially my argument, that writing AI should exist for assistive, but not transformative functions. And that bypasses the need to get permission, which would be extremely problematic with fair use. In fact, it would start shutting down some of the protections of fair use, which we as a society very much depend on. Excuse me while I brace myself for some painting here. So no, I'm not anti-AI. I am absolutely fascinated by what's happening. And of course, the third case I mentioned earlier that was filed some weeks ago and we're nowhere near a decision on is the Universal and Disney case, which I think they have an extremely strong chance of winning on. It's filed in a California circuit that's very friendly to movie studios, and I think they have a great argument. When you can go into Midjourney and type in Yoda holding a dildo, and it gives you a picture of Yoda holding a dildo, you're using their copyrighted works. You're producing trademark violations. I think they're going to win that case easily. And, you know, I cheer them on for it. Good for them. And trust me, getting me to cheer on Disney, this might be the first time ever. Disney is responsible for copyright extensions that I think are downright unethical. I think that's a decent color for that. I need to find the brown I used for here, and I need to do the window frames, but since I just put a wet coat on there, I'm going to hold off on that. Let's start looking at this. The actual color of the 3D filament is not bad, but it makes that striation obvious, which I don't want. So I'm going to go for a color similar to it, this Crixbane highlight. Crix is one of the factions in War Machine, and this is a paint from that. They're a faction of undead, if anyone's curious. That's a nice, smooth gray color. I think it'll look good. Let's do a little test area first, though. We'll go ahead and do this little area that I got some brown on, because we need to cover that up anyway. And I want to make sure it's a little different from the slate roof up here. And I think it is. It's not a lot different, but it's a little. Okay, that's pretty darn close. They're different colors, but they're really close. I don't know. Should I go with something a bit different there? I'm concerned that's too close. And look at that. Look at this color right next to the slate roof that I painted. Those grays are super, super close. Alright, I think I'm going to back up and do something else with it. What could I do with it? Maybe do something a little crazy. It doesn't have to be stone. It could be a plaster that's painted. But what supplementary colors would look nice? Maybe frostbite, light blue? I could see that. Ooh, this paint is pretty much dead. That's not happening. In fact, I can just throw that one away. Where's my little trash can? This is my little desk trash. It's an old candle holder that I repurposed for holding some trash in. Oh, so what color do I make this? Well, I could be creepy and make it a flesh color. Human flesh. Nothing to be weird about that, right? Don't answer that. This is also a sort of light blue. Let's take a look at it. This is a Citadel paint. Citadel produces the Warhammer, Warhammer 40k, Age of Sigmar stuff, all that, which I don't play, but they have good paints. Excuse me while I open this up. It is a little stuck. There's probably some dried paint in here. Ah, shit. God damn it. Well, I have yet another shirt that has paint on it. Again. I think after this stream, I'm just going to take this shirt off. I'm going to put it right here. And this is going to be my committed painting shirt for the stream from now on. And over time, you can just see how many layers and accidents of paint I build up on it. How does that sound? I'm aggravated. So what do we think of that blue? I'm kind of digging it. All right, let's start getting some blue in there. So that's the current world of AI discussion that interests me, that the transformative element of fair use and the issues regarding the volume of it potentially changing a traditional viewpoint on the competition factor of fair use. I think these are really interesting things that authors need to be paying attention to right now. And it's one of the reasons I don't like the idea of being anti-AI, because, as I said earlier, the genie's out of the bottle. And once the genie's out of the bottle, you're not putting it back in. And if you want to be a constructive part of a conversation, if you are pro-author, if you are pro-creator, then you need to be in this discussion. If you just are anti-AI and you're just standing there going, shut it down, don't use it, it's unrealistic, and I think you're just virtue signaling or being a little moronic, and you're not actually going to help creators. I mean, one of the things I'd love to see actually may be out the window now with the transformative court ruling, which is I wanted to see the equivalent of a copyright clearinghouse for LLMs where creators who had their works used got recompensated. Now, there's difficulty with requiring that because what the LLMs are also doing, and the reason the judge ruled that the database used for the LLMs itself is not illegal, is because what they're basically doing is transforming the works into a form of metadata. And they're just storing the metadata, which is not illegal. Metadata, which is information about a work, is not illegal. Otherwise, librarians couldn't catalog books and stuff. And the fact that it takes a lot of work still makes it uncopyrightable. But data sets can be proprietary and held in secret, which they do, obviously, because they don't want to share the data sets with each other. I have argued that a legal change to make a certain degree of metadata, like the transformative, like the properties of the entire work, rather than just describing the instance of the work, would allow authors to copyright the metadata itself. I still think this is something we should be considering. This would make companies that use an author's works, even for assistive purposes, make them pay the original author. And give the authors the ability to opt out if they want to. Now, is this absolutely something we should do? I don't know. It's an idea. Somebody could probably talk me out of it. But I think these are the sort of discussions and ideas sharing we should be having. Things that are productive about how to make things better, not just yell like old men at the sky that the new world is bad and we're scared of it. Let's have actual constructive conversations. I know, a lot of this is happening on the internet. Asking for constructive conversations on the internet's hard. But maybe we should start. We're writers. It's almost like using words is something we should be able to do. Of course, on the other hand, we're also writers because we like to control what the characters say. So maybe that's a bad point of comparison. I'm not going to go a lot further with this blue just now. I'm just doing this section. I want to see how it looks when it dries. But I think I'm going to head this direction. I still need to fill in some gaps here with some putty. And this definitely will take multiple coats to look decent. But I'm leaning towards it. I'm thinking it's looking good. Man, I am going to have a lot of touch-up to do, but that's normal for me. Wash my brush. At some point, I'm going to look at adding a second camera here, so you can see a couple different angles of what I'm doing, like picture in picture. All right, I'm going to put that aside for now because we've got a lot of paint drying on it. And I'm going to return to this little guy. So what do I want to do with him? I think I'm going to start with doing a base for his cloak. That would make sense. But the staff, I'm going to start next. Now, I did the bottom of his staff wooden. There's some elements here that are going to offset in metal. And I'm going to make this metal, I think. Because if you look at the patterning here, that is definitely more forged and shaped than grown. It could be bone. I could do it like bone, which would be interesting. But I think I'm going to stick with a metallic vibe, and I'm going to go with quicksilver. A really light, bright silver here for this. Oops. The top came off this one. That's okay. I'll just treat it like a little paint pot right there. Ah! Excuse me. Apparently, I am clumsy this morning. Oh, my eyes are getting old. I can't see as well as I once did. I probably should wear my glasses for doing this. Well, that's okay. I'm just blocking in. I'll do touch-up later. I usually do a lot of touch-up to get all those little details that I like. This will definitely need a wash on it as well to bring out all these little crevices. Somebody asked me recently about it, if I enjoy doing like pottery store painting things. And the truth is, I don't. I love all these little details. I like painting all the little things. I'm also the writer that creates characters you never see and have backgrounds and personalities in my head for characters you see only briefly. I love the details. All right. I think I'm going to leave that at that right now. Before we meet next time, I am going to put out some colors specifically for this. I need to do a little maintenance around my desk here. But that's all for now. I'm really curious about people's opinions about the AI stuff. If you weren't able to make the chat, join me over on Substack. I'd love to have discussions about this and how it impacts writers. And I really want to hear the view of readers. You know, while the view of writers is very important because this is a copyright issue and the writers are the ones with copyright to worry about, the market is defined by the readers. So I'm really curious what the readers think. All right. I will see you next week. Bye.